Hey everybody, Dr. Jared Skowron from Spectrum Awakening. Today's Facebook Live is going to be about mold. You know, and mold has really gained a lot of interest the past few years as a big infection when we look at our kids on the spectrum. So for some, there are reasons that a lot of our kids on the spectrum are very susceptible to gut infections, all right? And this can be a yeast infection, this can be a parasite infection, this can be a bacterial infection. There are a lot of, or did I say parasites? I think so. Anyway, yeast, bacteria, parasites, you name it. There's a lot of infections that our kids get in their guts. Now, this has to do with immune system compromise, which has to do with mitochondrial dysfunction, which ultimately probably has to do with toxicity. So toxicity kind of is the initial push on the domino that eventually causes the immune system problem that lets all of these infections grow. Now, many people are very well educated about candida and how yeast infections are very common. And and the symptoms of yeast infections, and we did Facebook Live on that recently. If you want to go back and watch that, people are familiar with bacterial infections, whether that be C. diff or H. pylori, etc. And of course, parasites are more prevalent than you'd think. In fact, I just talked to a patient, before I got on Facebook Live, who had a parasite infection. They had blastocystitis, and we did our treatments for it, and we're doing our follow-up improvements, follow-up testing, and watching the improvements as we killed off that parasite. So the infection that we're going to talk about today is a mold infection. All right, so mold, most people don't think of as, hey, I got infected by mold. It's just some environmental thing. It's out there, it grows on my bread if I leave it too long, grows on my cheese if I leave it too long. It's out in the world, it's where it's moist, yada, yada. However, the mold is a living fungus. Okay, and the other living fungus that's out there that's very common is candida. All right, so both candida and yeast, as well as mold, are just different types of fungus or fungi. All right, so they can cause very similar symptoms. So when we look at our kids who are very hyper and very stimming, kids who do a lot of motor flapping as their stim, kids who have a lot of that inappropriate laughter, all right? We normally associate these symptoms with yeast, with candida, and with fungus, but that other fungus could be a mold infection. So what I really want to encourage you guys, we're going to talk about, how to test for the mold infection and how to treat the mold infection. But I want you to think of a mold infection to have similar symptoms to a candida infection or to a yeast infection, all right? So just like, just like any type of infection, what you wanna do is test for it. You never know what's best until you test, all right? So there's two things to do. If you think your child may potentially have a mold infection, there's two things to do. Number one, you want to find out where it came from. And the number one place that you're gonna get mold is from your house. So I would highly recommend, highly recommend getting some over-the-counter mold test. You can get these at hardware stores like Home Depot or Lowe's or your local hardware store, as well as on Amazon or online. There's these mold tests everywhere. There are these big mold remediation companies, but they cost a lot of money. So if you want to spend that money on a mold remediation group to do thorough testing, you can, or you can get these more affordable tests over the counter. So what I would do is test your house, because that's where your child presumably spends the most time, or test the areas where they spend the most time. How is their therapist's office? Does it smell moldy? Does it smell musty? Grandparents, other family members, school systems. What smells musty? What might have mold? Excuse me. Ate something funny just before I got online. So you want to test for those places because that's where you're getting the infection and the reinfection day after day after time after time after time. Now, I've talked to people who have had really old houses and they've had flooding in their basement and they've got mold. I've talked to people who've had mold in their bathroom, okay? Even behind the walls, behind the drywall of your house, they've had mold infections. As well as even places that are really dry. I talk to people who live in really dry areas and they will actually get mold. I remember one of my patients specifically had mold in the discharge pipe from their washing machine. So the discharge pipe where the water goes down for the washing machine, that got moldy. When they cleaned that mold out, their child had huge improvements in sleep. Okay, we see language improvements, we see sensory improvements, we see anxiety behavior improvements, we see GI improvements, we see sleep improvements when we treat the mold. So they got the mold out of the house, and that's when they started to see the improvements. Okay, so check your house. I've even talked to people who've had brand new houses. So I talked to a patient whose house was literally 2 years old, but the builders didn't seal the roof line well enough. So water came in under the roof line and down behind the walls, and they saw mold growing along where their wall met their carpet. So even if you have a new house, check for mold. You have an old house, check for mold. You have a dry house, check for mold. You have a humid house, check for mold. Check for mold and get rid of it. Excuse me. Because if you don't get rid of it, you're just going to get reinfected and reinfected and reinfected no matter how much you treat it, okay? So let's get into the treatments briefly, and then we'll talk about how to, we'll talk about the scientific research behind this. So because mold is a fungus, I like to treat it the same way I treat other fungus, same way I treat candida, all right? So we use our yeast mold bundle, okay? So our yeast mold bundle has 3 things. Our yeast mold bundle has a biofilm enzyme, which helps break down the protective biofilm of fungus. We've got a binder, which is mostly a chlorella supplement. It's got other ingredients in there, but it's mostly chlorella. It helps bind things and reduce die-off reactions. And then we've got an option of 2 different herbs that'll kill the mold. And what I normally recommend is choose the one your child can handle the flavor of better. So we have a grapefruit seed extract. We call that the yeast mold GFSE. And we have a combination, hold on, I gotta get my cheaters again as usual. I just might as well wear these all the time. We've got a combination of oregano, ginger, and fennel. And that's called a yeast mold No More Mr. Fun Guy. I get it. I love people who name our stuff. Speaking of naming, we've completed our naming survey. So we have 5 new products, which we're hopefully going to launch next week. We had our naming survey, and the people who named our products, the name that we chose, is going to get a free bottle. And I'd like to interrupt right now to thank Rachel for sending 100 stars to us. Last week, we started our Facebook Stars promo. So Facebook Stars are a way that you can give a Facebook Live speaker a donation, basically. So the stars equate to money from Facebook. We are taking every cent of the stars that you give to us and giving it to autism support groups. We're giving it to TACA and Autism Hope Alliance. So if you'd like to donate to TACA and Autism Hope Alliance with your stars, you can give it to our Facebook page during the Facebook Live. We're going to send everything over to TACA and Autism Hope Alliance. So thank you, Rachel, for sending over 100 stars. So back to our different treatments. Again, this No More Mr. Fun Guy that we have is a soft gel. All right, so you have to swallow the pill. You could puncture it and kind of squeeze out the oil, but it is such an intense flavor. It's like going to an Italian restaurant and eating everything in the restaurant all at once. The flavor is so extreme, and that I would not pierce these open. I would swallow the soft gel, and they're tiny. The GFSE, if you can't swallow these pills, these are capsules. You can open up, mix powder in. You know, it's made of grapefruit seeds. They're sour, but you can mix it in something that's sour, like an orange juice, or something that has a sourness to it, like a berry-flavored yogurt. Like strawberries, kind of like half sweet, half bitter, sour. So you can mix it in something like that. But if your child likes that sour kind of flavor, the orange juice, etc., easy to do. So those are the 2 options that we have, but you get the idea. What you want to do to kill off mold inside the body is break down the biofilm with an enzyme, kill it with some kind of herbal, like grapefruit seed extract or the oregano, etc., and then take a binder, like chlorella binder, like we have. A lot of people use activated charcoal. Bind the mycotoxins, the toxins that are released from the mold, flush them out of the body. Okay, but you've got to get rid of it from where it lives. Okay, you can clean out the body as much as you want, but if you're getting reinfected from your house, it's never going to go away. Okay, this may be an issue why a lot of our patients who take nystatin have to take it for 6, 12, 24 months. Maybe it's not killing candida, maybe it's killing mold, and you just keep getting reinfected. So you gotta clean out your house or wherever the child's getting it. Again, check schools, check therapy office, check grandma and grandpa. Wherever the child spends a lot of time and there's obvious mold, get rid of it. Okay, excuse me. So let's go over the research, okay? Am I making this stuff up? We'll find out. So Oh, Janine from Jersey, thank you for all the information for families in Taka. Janine, good to see you guys. And Janine sent 150 stars. Thanks, Janine. Hope everybody's doing well. We haven't chatted in a while, but I hope you're doing well. All right, so let's take a look at some research. Now, this research study here is from, I highlighted, it's from 2009. This is not new stuff, people, all right? This is over a decade old research. Does mold-associated impairments of the brain relate to autism? And they looked at different kids with autism, some that had mold and some that didn't. So they had 8 ASD boys and they did some kind of test on how many symptoms they had, basically. So they averaged 6.8 abnormalities in that community, but the 6 mold-exposed kids on the spectrum averaged 12.2 abnormalities. And the most frequent abnormalities had to do with balance, visual field issues, prolonged blink reflex issues, as well as what I had, symbol substitution, peg placement, fingertip number, etc., picture completion, things that they use to kind of analyze these kids. So this is a study over a decade old that associates mold with autism symptoms. Okay, so that's right there is very intriguing. This has been around for a while, and we really need to investigate. Here's another research study, brand new from 2020. Rapid recovery from an autism child after treatment of aspergillus with certain antifungal drugs. Again, we can use natural stuff, we can use pharmaceuticals, but you got to kill it off. Again, this is a case study. This is one child, and this is an extreme improvement, which is nice to see, but you've always got to add that caveat, like on Weight Watchers commercials. Don't expect to lose 100 pounds in a day. So, complete recovery is a big word to say. But again, this does talk about how over the course of 3 months, mold treatment produced a significant improvement in this child. One of the authors here was is the owner of Great Plains Labs, and they do a mycotox test. In fact, it's a good time to talk about it. We talked about testing your house. We talked about treating your child. We didn't talk about testing your child. You can test for mold in yourself. You can test through a urine. So Great Plains Labs has a mold test called a mycotox test. If you want that, we've got it on our website. In fact, we've paired the mold test with the organic acid test, with the oat test. So we've got an oat mold combo from Great Plains on our website. If you want to get that test done, you can order it from our website. You'll get a written interpretation from me personally on what's going on, what to do, etc. And our coupons can always be used for our labs. So if you want to grab our coupon, which will be given out pretty soon, get that, use it for the Mycotox Lab, get the yeast mold bundle, test your house so you can figure this out. All right, moving on. The role of mycotoxins in the pathobiology of autism. All right, this talks about how OTA is a specific kind of mycotoxin, mold toxin. OTA exerts its neurotoxicity, especially in males. They saw that probiotic administration, specifically lactobacillus, could ameliorate those symptoms. So again, make sure, if you are doing probiotics, most probiotics contain a lactobacillus. If you need a good probiotic, I really like ours, Gut Reset 2, because it's got the correct lactobacillus strains like the plantarum and the rhamnosus and the acidophilus. It's got Saccharomyces, it's got bifidus, as well as a small prebiotic. So if you're looking for a probiotic, try Gut Reset. But there's a lot of probiotics out there, I get it. And of course, ours is dairy-free. All of our products are dairy-free. Next, here's another study, effects of mycotoxins or neuropsychiatric symptoms. They noted that mycotoxins, and this research study was not specifically on autism, but I'll tell you why this research study scared me, okay? We often talk about catching infections, all right? Hey, we talk about it all the time, catching infections with COVID. How do I catch a mold infection, all right? I used to be under the presumption that it was oral, okay? If you smell a musty room, there's mold in the air. There's actual molecules of mold. They get into your nose, you stiff them in, and then whoop, okay, you've got the mold because that floating molecule particle got inside you because you breathed it in. It's gonna be in your lungs, but it's also gonna stick to anything that's moist, your cheek, your throat, your nasal passages, and it's eventually gonna get swallowed down into your gut. But this research study talks about how mycotoxins are absorbed from the skin and the airways and the intestinal lining. So even if you don't breathe it in, it lands on your skin and it gets absorbed. That blew my mind. That's why we got to clean up the house, okay? Mycotoxins are of course, considered to be in the pathogenesis of autism. All right, next, different research studies to kill it. Effects of grapefruit seed extract on the growth of yeast-like fungi, dermatophytes, and molds. So this research study talked about how grapefruit seed extract, like our GFSC, kills mold, okay? You gotta kill it in the gut, and you gotta get rid of it in your house. You can even use grapefruit seed extract, mix it in water and use it as a spray to kill mold on your walls. Here's another one. Grapefruit seed extract effectively inhibits candida and kills the biofilm. So not only do we have a biofilm enzyme, but grapefruit seed extract will kill the biofilm. And there's not as much research on mold as there is candida, but because they're both fungus, we can presume a similar reaction to treatments. All right, so here's another one. This is evaluation of oregano oil. This is the oreganum, Latin term for oregano, against candida. It works against candida. That's why we have it in our No More Mr. Fungi. That's got the oregano oil, okay? No More Mr. Fungi also contains the fennel. Why? Because fennel has antifungal activity as well, all right? Here's another one about oregano, also about thyme. Thyme is also a good one. This shows about how oregano and thyme are very strong antibacterial and antifungals, okay? So it's, when you're using pharmaceuticals, if you use nystatin or diflucan or ketoconazole, you're gonna kill the fungus. If you wanna kill bacteria, you need an antibiotic. You use the herbals and you got double duty, which is great. All right, and last but not least, this was an article about thyme. So thyme essential oil is also great against gray mold, or a specific mold that they were looking for. But again, this stuff is pretty, ubiquitous. If it's going to kill a mold, it's going to kill a mold in general. So that's the research I have. So let me kind of summarize, give you the coupon, and then go into our live Q&A. Mold is out there. Period. Mold grows, and it can be making autism much worse. All right. I don't think it's causing autism because I think it would be more prevalent. And I don't think we would have this explosion in the past decades of autism because, it's not like mold is new. So, but it will make it worse because it's an infection. So what are your options? 3 things to do. If you want to test for it, okay? Honestly, the mycotox test from Great Plains is the only test out there that I've seen looking for these mycotoxins. There may be other tests out there, I'm just not aware. If you want the test and you want it through us, we got it on our website. It's an oat mold combo. It's a urine test. Use the coupons, bada bing. If you just want to treat it, okay? Use our yeast mold bundle, kick it out, and test your house. And look, honestly, test your house first, because if it's in your house, presumably it's in your child. All right, period. That's the way it works, okay? So those are 3 things you need to do. Clean your house or the areas that your kid's in. Test if you want to for the mold, and treat it and kick it out. But until you get the area clean that's causing the reinfection, treating yourself, treating your child is only gonna be forever, all right?